Welcome into Bluejay Breakdown. We are in the post-Vegas Players Era edition right now, where Creighton went 1-2 to bring the record to 4-3 on the season, but there might have been a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel for the Jays. Let's start with their opening game against Baylor. This is a type of team that Creighton has typically struggled with, and they were in this one. They had every opportunity to win, end up falling 81-74, but that's a game where Creighton has to feel at least decent about how they played. Now, they did start to run some guys some pretty serious minutes, particularly Josh Dix, who played 39 minutes, maybe his best overall game of the season, not necessarily best shooting game from three, but he had 15 points and 6 assists for Creighton on just 1 turnover, as we saw him take over some more ball handling duties than maybe he had earlier in the season. It was also a breakout game for Hudson Greer, who scored 16 points on 7 of 8 shooting, as we started to see him expand his role a little bit for Creighton after deciding not to redshirt him. I think that was a critical decision for Creighton, and especially with the injury to Jackson McAndrew, Hudson Greer had some minutes open up for him that way. And I think he's a type of guy that Creighton is going to need over the course of the season. Just his skill set and his athleticism, I think, is going to be important for them over the course of the season. One thing I did notice against Baylor was Owen Freeman only had 9 minutes. That's something that I think Creighton's going to have to continually watch as he recovers from that offseason knee injury. They're going to need 20 to 25 minutes from him a game if they're going to be successful and reach their ceiling this year. Just 9 minutes against Baylor isn't going to cut it. So they're going to have to figure out a way to get him into a place where he can play 20, 25 minutes a game. The other thing we saw here was something that's been developing over the course of the season. And Baylor, the first loss of the Players Era tournament, and then the Oregon win, I think, are really interesting kind of juxtaposition of who Nick Graves has been so far for Creighton this season. You've got the good and the bad with how he's played, and that has really impacted, I think, the results for Creighton. Right now, they don't really have a way to overcome a bad Nick Graves game. They've got a lot riding on him in the point guard spot. It doesn't look like Ty Davis is totally ready to take over more significant minutes there. I do think they want to play him for just culture, leadership. Coach McDermott talked about grit when deciding to pull the red shirt of Hudson Greer. I think Ty Davis is a grit guy for this team. That's a really tough spot to be in, because he seems like he has struggled against certain matchups at that point guard spot. So we'll continue to watch that. But I do think Creighton has found itself in a position where they are very dependent on how Nick Graves plays and how that plays itself out over the course of the game. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that. But one of the things, if I was Creighton, that I would try and coach myself into some options is making me less reliant on one individual player, whether it's Nick Graves or anyone else, on one individual player needing to play at a super high level. I thought that was going to be one of the strengths coming into this year of this team, because I thought there were a lot of different guys they could go to. I do still think that's the case, but because Nick Graves has been kind of in charge of that point guard spot, that may be more critical than I was giving it credit for in the offseason. The middle game against Iowa State, I'm not going to spend too much time on. Creighton just looked outclassed in the way that they were defended by Iowa State. That's a really good Iowa State team that defends at a super high level. Every TJ Otzelberger team is going to defend at a super high level. Creighton did start to figure some things out in the second half, getting 34 second half points, but they were held to 26 in the first half, and it just wasn't going to get any better from there. They also just didn't shoot the ball particularly well, which is going to be a theme. If Creighton doesn't figure out a way to shoot the ball, it's going to be a lot easier to defend them. That sounds like a no-brainer, but they really need their shooting ability to open some other things up, especially until Owen Freeman's able to play some heavier minutes, which he did get to 17 minutes against Oregon in Creighton's lone win in Vegas. In those 17 minutes, though, he had 14 points and 7 rebounds. That's the type of effort that Owen Freeman is going to have to put up for Creighton throughout the course of the year. Like I said, you probably want him 20 to 25 minutes a game, but 14 and 7 is right in the neighborhood of where you need him to be moving forward. Another thing that emerged over the week, I think, was how important Blake Harper is going to be. He's a guy that can go and get Creighton a bucket when everything else is sort of bogging down. And that brings me back to the Nick Graves of it all. When he's not playing well, you need a couple other guys to be able to go and get Creighton offense when the offense that is not really humming the way it's designed. So that's going to be really big for, I think, Blake Harper and I think Josh Dix. We saw over the course of the week in Vegas, Josh Dix go out and be able to get his own bucket as well as create for others. That's something I think could be really big for Creighton moving forward. They've got to find a balance between being able to take advantage of what Nick Graves brings to the table and not be at the mercy of when he's not having a good night. Having guys like Blake Harper and Josh Dix goes a long way in order to give you options so that you're not beholden to a bad Nick Graves shooting performance or whatever type of performance if he's not feeling it that night. The other place that I think Creighton can turn to is Owen Freeman. I know that's weird. Nick Graves is guard, Owen Freeman's a center. But if you can get offense from Owen Freeman, I actually think his offensive game is super advanced, especially for a big. If he's healthy and you can get consistent offense out of Owen Freeman, I really think you have an opportunity to alleviate some of the pressure, not just off Nick Graves, but off of all the guards, and things will start to open up for them as well. The other thing we saw against Oregon is it seemed like the rotation started to tighten up a little bit, and we have a better idea of what minutes might look like. You had 4 guys play 30 or more minutes. It was Jason Green, Josh Dix, Nick Graves, and Blake Harper. And you had 3 guys play more than 13 minutes, between 13 and 17. That was Hudson Greer, Kareem Kanan, and Owen Freeman. Like I said, I expect Owen Freeman's minutes to go up, so this might change a little bit. But that's your 8-man rotation right there. Then you had 3 guys between 5 and 8 minutes in Ty Davis, Isaac Trout, and Fedor Zugic. I personally would like to see a little bit more from Fedor Zugic. I think he's got a skill set that helps alleviate some of the pressure I was talking about in the backcourt if either Nick Graves or somebody else isn't playing well. But obviously, that's not what Coach Mack has seen so far this year. Maybe he's sacrificing those minutes because he thinks Hudson Greer brings other things to the table that Creighton needs a little bit more. But that's going to be really interesting moving forward. I think one of the most important things that Creighton can figure out here is what their rotation is, whether that's on offense, which is the implications of that are clear. But I think more importantly on defense, until they figure out who's going to be playing with each other consistently and whether they're going Owen Freeman with a traditional 5, Jason Green with a small ball 5, defensively, they've got to have a lot of chemistry to play the team defense they need to now that they don't have just the ultimate eraser in Ryan Kalkbrenner back there. So all in all, I actually do think it was a productive week in Vegas, even though Creighton only came away with 1 win in their 3 games. I do think they started to figure out a rotation. I think they've started to find something in what Blake Harper and Josh Dix can bring to the table as shot creators and offensive creators. And I think they started to learn that they have to find ways to not become so dependent on what Nick Graves brings to the table. And I think Nick Graves has started to figure out also maybe what his role needs to be. Maybe fewer 3-pointers, get into the lane, create offense that way, and not be as dependent on that jumper, which can be spotty and can leave him sometimes. That's Bluejay Breakdown, the post-Vegas Players Era edition. We will be back after the Creighton and Nebraska game on Sunday. And until then, we'll see you later.